Welcome to Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and me, Jim Cunningham.
Hey, Jim.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. These episodes, they just boom, there's the next one. I'm really surprised by it. We're in season 5 now, episode 5. 5th season. Very hard to believe.
It is. No one is more shocked than I am, to be honest with you. But it's so much fun for me. And I just want to reiterate that I'm having the time of my life with these interviews, talking to these magicians and or actors. It's been great. It's been a thrill and a joy, and I love every one of these things. And we have you to thank. All of us do. Mostly me.
Mostly you. Well, we've got a great one today. We've got Damian Jennings. I listened to Damian Jennings on the Vanishing Inc. podcast, The Insider, ever since they've started doing it. He has a great voice for podcasts. He's an excellent interviewer and didn't know his name. He never says his name on it. He says very little about himself on it, but he, as you listen more and more, you get little clues. You know he's the host of the Insider podcast. He's involved in marketing somehow. Turns out he's chief marketing officer at Vanishing Inc. And then when we sat down and talked with him, we found out he's got a pretty good CV in magic.
Yeah. I do not listen to the podcast yet, although now it is, of course, on my to-do list. But he is a tremendous marketer because I routinely buy things from Vanishing Inc. And it's largely due to his marketing prowess.
Yeah, they're great. And it was a delight to talk to him, particularly, like I said, because although I've listened to him for literally years, he hardly ever, and I mean ever, talks about himself, his life, or how he got started in magic. So that was my first question. You haven't talked on the show much about your journey into magic. I did some research. I understand you had an uncle who played a significant role. How did you get started?
Yes, I have an uncle who is a magician called Dominic Twos, who put a book out with International a few years ago called Impromptu Card Magic that was very well received. He was one of Fred Robinson's only pupils. And when I was about 9, he bought me the Starfish Book of Magic, which is so old, it has one trick in it, which is a color separation thing where half the deck's red and half's blue, and they take a card out of the black section and replace it in the red section so you can find it really easily. And that trick in the book was called The N-Word in the Woodpile. Very, very, very old book.
Wow.
And then he bought me Royal Robe when I was 11, and every Christmas we'd have family gatherings, and he and I, the two of us would sit in the corner of the family gathering, and he would teach me and help me get better. And yeah.
What a great resource to have right there in the family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was very lucky.
Well, who were your mentors after that?
No, just him, really.
Just him.
Ian Kendall. There was a time when I wanted to start doing parlor or stage or comedy club magic, and Ian Kendall worked with me to create those tricks and how to move stuff from here to here. But yeah, predominantly it's been Dominic, and I'm a lucky boy.
That's very, very lucky. Didn't you also do some acting to start out? Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, good research. My degree was in drama, and I did, when I was 11, they did Bugsy Malone in the West End of London, and I was a child star in that for 6 weeks, which was the working regulations for 11-year-olds in this country at the time.
Did you play Bugsy?
No, I did not play Bugsy.
Fat Sam? Who were you?
I was one of the two policemen trying to shut down the gang wars between Fat Sam and Dandy Dan. Okay. And a customer in the speakeasy, and a boxer in the boxing scene, and the pianist in the audition scene, and yeah, everybody that wasn't one of the top 3 or 4 characters played multiple parts. There were only 39 kids in the company.
So you're singing in the chorus. You're not getting to sing any of the solo stuff.
I didn't do a solo, no.
Oh.
And then did the degree in drama and realized I wasn't gonna. I always wanted to be an actor all my life, and then realized that I was unlikely to make money doing it, and so got a job, and the magic then took over as my performing outlet. I think most of us that do any kind of performance need something to get that out of you.
How did the degree in drama help you as a performer?
From when I have had guests on The Insider that have studied drama, I think it's really clear that it's just the way you stand on a stage. It's the way you know how to project, how to block something, how to find motivation for moving to pick up the weird thing that enables you to do the sneaky thing that you need to do, how to deal with other people on the stage. And I think that's something that through improv classes and whatever else, your participant in your trick is an unpaid part of your act. And so treating them with respect, but also kind of yes-anding them as much as you can, that they don't have the script and you do, or at least you know where you want to go. And so I think I would urge any magician to take a drama course or an improv course or join a community theatre or do anything to get some experience of working with a director or working on a stage. It changes everything, I think.
I agree completely that learning that skill set, having that skill set in your quiver is a very valuable thing. And if you don't, I think it shows. The more you perform, it's a doing thing, I think. So whatever, you'll get better. But having that sort of platform of some sort of stagecraft, or having worked with a director, which I think is very important, and that has been borne out through this podcast. Many of the guests have said, working with a director really changes things.
I mean, not everybody's in the position to pay a theatrical director to help them with their shows, but everybody's got a friend, and they don't even need to have any directorial experience. It'd be better if they did, but I don't think they need to have any directorial experience. Just sit here, watch it, and tell me when I look rubbish. Tell me when I'm flash. Tell me when the story doesn't make any sense. Help shape the foreshadowing or callbacks or the dramatic arc of the show, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
It would be great if they did have theatrical background, but I don't think it's necessary. Just an outside set of eyes of someone that you trust.
Yeah, I agree. And but the possibility of finding somebody that is a director exists, I think, for people. And I get the idea that, you don't want to have to shell out a lot of money if you're just trying to figure out your life. But I think you could probably find community theater directors with a lot of experience that probably wouldn't break your bank.
Yeah.
And it's so worth it to have somebody who knows what they're doing get you to the next level, essentially.
Yeah, 100%.
It's an overlooked resource that I agree with you. More people should take advantage of that.
I disagree 100%.
That's not true, because you're my director. So
that's true. No, I'm just thinking back earlier in the season, we talked to Doc Eason, and his big message was get caught, get caught. You're going to learn the most you can possibly learn by getting caught. And I think Jim's comment to him was, that's true. However, we live in the state of Minnesota, which is known for Minnesota nice. And I think, Jim, you posited that it's possible that sometimes the audiences are just too nice. Maybe you're doing a trick for just too nice to say, yeah, I saw the king there. You didn't know. I saw that. So you have to have the right audience.
There was some famous magician, I forget who used to hide in the lavatories in the interval or after his show so he could hear what real people were saying about whether something went wrong or not. But I do think, and it's the same, I think the Minnesota niceness could be like British politeness, that people would just be, they didn't want to make you feel bad. And but my daughter's 10 and she's learning magic now, and she's very scared of failing and what if something goes wrong. And so I'm just encouraging her to just brush it off and fail, and it doesn't matter. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You didn't find their card. Oh no.
That's exactly. The world will keep spinning. But I too, I know just enough magic to do what I need to do, and so I sort of side with your daughter on this, that it is a very scary thing, and I don't perform a lot of magic because one, it is nerve-wracking, and two, I have acquired a great respect for the art of magic, and I don't want to do anything that will diminish the art in a general audience's mind. And so I don't do a lot of magic because it's just, I would have to sit down and do too much work to get good at it. So I learned what I needed to learn, and I practiced what I needed to practice, and I had a director help me get it to where I wanted it to be. And now I'm comfortable in the little niche that I found for myself. But David Parr, a magician that we know and has been on the podcast, said at one point to me, an audience, if an audience doesn't know what you did, but they know when you did it, if they can't say, well, I don't know how he did it, but I know when he did it, magic is destroyed.
Yep.
So that idea, I think, of having a director of any level, as you said, a friend who said, well, I saw something there. I don't know what you did, but I saw some, is invaluable and overlooked. And if you have a respect for the art of magic or just the art of performing, you owe it to yourself, I think, to get somebody to see what you're doing, and get it to the next level.
Yeah, even if you're not flashing a pass, just if your shoulders tense up before you do a pass, and then somebody doesn't, well, I didn't see you do the pass, but something weird happened then, and that must have been when you did the cheaty thing, and therefore the trick is done for me.
Right.
And having somebody help you find those moments is invaluable, because you probably won't see them yourself. Now, if my research is again correct, Damian, you've done close-up, mentalism, stand-up parlor. Exactly, you've hit all those areas, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Is there one area that you enjoy the most?
I love card magic and always will, but probably because my wife was pregnant with my eldest. So about 11 years ago, I came up with a mentalism character act called Tony Sagittarius, the sexiest mind reader in the world. Who's horrible. He's a horrible person and misogynistic and old-fashioned and aforementioned uncle. I went up to see him for the weekend, and we may have got slightly drunk, and I said I wanted to do a mind reading act, but I didn't want to be Darren, so what can we do? And we had a bit more wine. He said, well, it's that Mel Gibson film, isn't it? If you could really read people's minds, you'd use it to sleep with women. Or the person of whatever sex you want to sleep with. And so then we created this horrible character that's a bit like David Brent from the UK Office or Alan Partridge. It's that kind of British cringe humor where you feel uncomfortable watching it, but you're still laughing. And Tony Sagittarius act is him selling the Tony Sagittarius seduction system, which is a book that enables you to read minds and control people's behavior to persuade them, ultimately, to have sex with you.
Yes, it's me! Tony Sagittarius, yes, the Tony Sagittarius. Wooer of women. Toucher of totty. Chatter up of chicks. And I am here this evening to sell you I am here this evening to sell you the incredible Tony Sagittarius Seduction System, TSSS.
That's fabulous. What a
and
fun idea.
It's a really good excuse to do mentalism, because it starts with the initials of the first person that they kissed, and then you can get their telephone or some of the digits of their telephone number, and then there's a confabulation, which is winning a dream date with Tony, and all of this stuff. And it's funny, but the tricks are good as well. That's what kind of makes it work as an act. And then we had children, and I didn't do it. And then at the session in January, I had the idea of organizing a late night, unrehearsed and unplanned show that they also did at Magi Fest to huge success. So we looked down the attendees list, and I cherry picked a few people that I knew. And I said, do you want to come and do, it's no money. It's just for fun. If you want to film it, you can. If you want to break in a new thing, you can. If you want to do something you've been doing for years, you can. It's just going to happen at 11 o'clock at night in this room. Nobody really knows what's going on. Who wants to do it? And I had a few lovely people, Tom Crosby and Quentin Reynolds and lots of other nice people volunteer to do 5-10 minutes. And I ended it with doing a bit of the Tony Sagittarius act. And it was so well received that now I'm writing a new show with him. And I kind of left it alone for 10 years and hadn't done it, but it was so lovely. And I auditioned for the Penn and Teller Fool Us producers, and they loved it, and we're just trying to make it so it's not so misogynistic, because that it was 10 years ago. It was before Me Too when we did it, but on paper, like every participant that I bring up is a woman, and everyone he calls sexy lady. This hi, sexy lady, come and sit on Tony's love seat. But it's so tongue in cheek, and he's got a medallion and a polo neck, and my hair's slicked back, and he's horrible, but no woman volunteer ever felt uncomfortable. The game is so clear from the very, very beginning that this is tongue in cheek, and it is a pastiche, and it's a character. So, yeah, we're trying to work out a way of making it acceptable for network American television. And their current suggestion is to make Tony bisexual. Yeah. Which would really work in the kind of, he's so desperate and he's so sad that the whole idea of kind of any port in a storm would completely fly. So we're just trying to work on that. And then I'm writing a new show for him, and that he is what I enjoy the most. That's the most fun I've ever had doing magic. But close up card magic with a borrowed deck of cards is something that I'll always love. I always have a deck of cards in my hands, and that's my jam.
I have to say that if I'll make this promise for Jim and myself, if you decide to put this up at Edinburgh next year as sort of a testing ground for Tony, we love Scotland, so
I'll get on a plane tomorrow.
Oh, how lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
Very, very fun.
What a great idea. You know, we had Nick Mohammed on last season talking about Mr. Swallow.
Yeah.
And although Nick is known to the U.S. audiences, Mr. Swallow is not. And so we put up some clips so people could see him in action. But it's similar to Tony in that you've taken a really strong character who shouldn't be doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
And given him a reason to do it. And with mentalism, boy, for me watching, it's always been like, well, if you could do that, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? I'll also admit at this point, because I'm not a magician, I do only one trick. I listened to your podcast for, let's say, years.
Oh, thank you.
Before, because it's very helpful, learn a lot. But at one point in passing, you said, with our opening sound effect, the riffling of cards, and I thought, oh, that's what that is. I never understood what that was because I'm not the magician. But now with your love of cards, it makes perfect sense. And now, of course, when I hear it, I know immediately what it is, but it's just...
I also wanted a 2-second intro. I listen to loads of podcasts, and I've been into podcasts. I always manage to shoehorn it into whatever job I'm doing. that I pitched them. I think we should definitely do a podcast. That's what we should do for marketing, is we should do a podcast. And I found the MP3 of the first ever one I did, and it was 21 years ago.
Wow. Way ahead of the curve. Way ahead of the curve.
It was when the Geeks owned it, and it was Adam Curry doing his daily show and these few other things. And because it was for the first time I did it, it was for a trade show, business to business trade show called Internet World in London. So it kind of fitted that it was not quite bleeding edge, but a very new, embryonic and exciting sort of format that was happening. And then, you know, the serial podcast happened, and then everybody knows what a podcast is.
But for a while there, nobody knew.
No.
And there's still people in my circle who still don't know. But that's okay. You know, I've learned so much from the interviews that you've done over the years. Are there any that just jump out as being like, that was a moment? That was, for me as an interviewer, that was a moment.
Yeah. Andy Nyman, that was just an hour of gold. And the way he thinks and the way his mind works is exceptional. The Teller one was the one I was most nervous of, because he's such a hero, and I didn't want to mess it up.
Can I tell you our Teller story?
No, go ahead.
I want to hear more, but I'll just tell you, you know, we got him on the phone with a magician friend of ours, Michael Callahan, who is Teller is his mentor.
Right.
And so the whole topic was, let's talk about mentorship. And hello, Teller, I'm John, this is Jim. We want to talk about your role as a mentor and Michael's role as a mentee. And he went, stop.
Stop right there. Stop right there. The word mentee needs to be eliminated from our vocabulary.
Does it really?
Yes, it does. Mentor was a character in the Odyssey. He's an old family friend of Odysseus's family. Odysseus entrusted his son Telemachus to mentor's care and instruction. So if you want to call somebody the corresponding thing to mentor, that is the person who is being mentored, you can refer to that person as a Telemachus.
I'm writing this down.
Please do.
A Telemachus?
It is absolutely offensive to me as an old Latinist to hear the number of times that I hear mentee, which just makes me makes me think of some kind of beverage. You know, I won't.
4 mentees and a fried chicken, please.
Yes, I won't have it. It sounds like a cocktail.
For me, what a wonderful moment that was for me, because John is the brains of the operation, and to be one sentence in, yes, they stop. You don't know what you're talking about. Was a wonderful moment for me, because it doesn't happen in our friendship very often that John is not the smartest guy in the room. So
well, I wouldn't go that far, but the rest of it was gold, because he was just so sweet and so kind and so
he's so generous.
Yeah.
And then the third one that stands out was at the beginning of the show, really quite close to the beginning of the show, which was Avner the eccentric. And the lessons in that, those are the 3 that I always tell. I like all of my babies the same, but those 3 the standout ones. The advice that Avner gives is astonishing.
Yes, he teaches occasionally a master class in how to do what he does, and he did it at Magi Fest a couple years ago. If you ever get a chance to see it, I recommend all listeners go out and see that, because every performer can learn from his decades of experience and how easy he makes it look when it isn't really all that easy.
Absolutely.
So we learned a lot about interviewing magicians from listening to you, from listening. There was a podcast that Dodd Vickers did, and he did.
Oh, yeah.
He did in-depth interviews with magicians, just like you do. And as a non-magician who's trying to write books about the life of a magician, it's really, really helpful to hear people talk about what is their concern? What is it that, gets under their skin? What makes them nervous? What have you learned about the best way to interview magicians to get the kind of stuff out that you want? And this is fully a self-serving question.
But that's fine. It's a good one. No, it's a good one. What I try and do is listen to or read as many interviews as my prospective guest has done as possible, and come up with questions that they're not asked all the time. I think a lot of people get asked the same questions all the time, and I want to give them something to think about, or something that they haven't possibly been asked ever before. And so, yeah, that's the secret sauce: research.
Okay, now I want to just switch over to your marketing background, because I'm fascinated by what you do at Vanishing Inc. And like I said, I've listened to, I think, every episode of the podcast.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you.
Well, because you have great people on, you're very good at talking to them, and I learned stuff from them. But what I was surprised by was you don't talk about yourself a lot.
No, never. I don't even say my name on the show.
Yeah. And you also don't talk about your background in magic. So you seem like a really good interviewer, Graham Norton interviewer. You're asking the right questions, you're getting laughs, you're connecting with them. And then you'll just, in passing, they'll say something and you'll say, oh yeah, well, oh yeah, I know what you mean, like Hoffmeyer in 1924. And it's like, oh, wait a second, he knows a ton about magic. But you do not show off at all about that. So I found that fascinating. It's about the person who's...
I don't think anybody's really interested in me. And when you asked me to come on this, I was quite surprised, genuinely surprised. But I think my job as an interviewer is to shine the light on my guest, not on me. No one's tuning in to listen to my opinion about something. So if the conversation is going that way, occasionally I might give an opinion, but generally I think nobody cares, and they've come to listen to my guest.
Well, some of us care.
Well,
I can't give any numbers on that, but I'm always delighted when you give a little of yourself. So there was that aspect of it that I wanted to learn about, how you approach interviewing, but also your role as chief marketing officer, I think it is, at Vanishing Inc., which you never talk about. And this idea of taking an idea from an idea to creating a product to then it has to be marketed is something we've touched on a little bit with like David Regal. David, how do you create and market a product? How do you deal with piracy, that sort of thing? But never really from a semi-corporate standpoint. So what is the process at Vanishing Inc., and what part do you play from someone sending you an email saying, I've got a thing, to all of a sudden it's online and being sold?
I don't get involved in the email saying, we've got a thing. We have a product team led up by Mysterious George and Tim Hill, whose wonderful Emergence James Bond coin shooty thing just recently came out. So I don't get involved in the pitch stage, because we can very easily get to a too many cooks situation. So there's two guys on the product team. Josh and Andy get involved, and Jeff, our CFO. They don't need input from the marketing monkeys at that point.
Marketing monkeys.
Yeah, it's me and my colleague Matt out of Brooklyn are the marketing monkeys of Vanishing Inc. So we get involved normally when something has been greenlit or is just about to be greenlit, and we will then try and think about who's going to buy the trick, who's it for, because the thing that sells the best, the things that sell the best really are unusual, self-working or almost self-working visual card magic. That's the jam of the majority of the customers that we have. So when we've got something that isn't that, how are we going to find a way to make people, to be utterly frank, to make people want it? And so it's to try and create routines or presentations that could be done. So here's a perfect example. Luke Jamay's book test Illumination came out fairly recently, and we made a mistake in the marketing of it. And we said it's a 15-minute act. And the number of our customers that are in a position to do a 15-minute act is much smaller than the ones that are entertaining their friends at the bar, or when people come around to their house and what have you. Really? So with the follow-up marketing bit, we pivoted it and said, because it's essentially, there's, with permission, is a bit of mother of all book tests in there. And so but it's half the price of mother of all book tests. So there is that's the aspect, isn't it? It's like you don't have to do this whole beautiful thing. It's modular. You can take these aspects out of it. So the product gets greenlit. We have a meeting with the marketing, Matt and I, the marketing team, have a meeting with the product team. They tell us what the trick is. We watch the videos. We look at how it's done. We try and think of what the concerns customers would have when they get it. We've all been in a situation where a trick has arrived. We open up the box and go, no. So how do you minimize that? I think the one thing we do very well at Vanishing Inc. is honesty and transparency with our copy as much as we can. We try to be very, very, very fair and let people know as much as we can what they are getting, what the skill, although there's no accepted skill level in Magic. Oh, that's a 3. I know exactly what that means. I need to be able to do DPS. And then we work out what kind of product it is, so how much attention it needs. Like certain things will sell themselves. Anything that Joshua J puts out will sell itself, but we still give those love and attention that they deserve. So then we kind of sit there and think, well, what are we going to do on social media? How's the we get involved with creating the trailer and writing the scripts for the trailers to try and make them different and interesting. Obviously the product copy, and then any additional advertising or promotion we're going to do, any viral meme kind of things or additional videos. We've learned that full trailers don't actually get that much engagement on social media. So what are we going to do with social media to get the engagement? And then the product comes out.
And then Jim buys it.
Yeah, and I do. I was just thinking, when you described your customer, I went, holy crap, that's me. I just bought something from Vanishing Inc. that I'm sure you marketed, but that I thought was just, that I could use that actually. So I'm waiting patiently for it to arrive in the mail. But it is a card trick that I'm sure you wrote the copy for. And I am your customer, that's right in my wheelhouse.
Thank you for your money.
Skill. That's where I'm living. So
yeah, but we also, we got the Dennis Bear books back in stock a couple of weeks ago, and they flew off the shelves. And that is very intermediate to advanced level card stuff. So there are people that want a self-working trick, and there are people that like the move monkey stuff, and there are people that like mentalism, and there are people that, so we've got to try and create a balance of products. There's a parlor trick that we're bringing out shortly that is going to have a very limited potential audience, because it is one of the things that you do need to perform in a parlor environment. But sometimes it's the right thing to do. And everything we try and do is to improve the art of Magic. That's our internal kind of mission statement. And when we think about any activity that we're doing, it is to try and leave Magic in a slightly better place than it was before we did the thing, which is why we have the charity and work so closely with that. And we've commissioned, and I love this about the right thing. We've commissioned a book on the history of female magicians and a book on the history of Black magicians, to remarkably underserved sections of our community, and to do the right thing. And that's one of the reasons why I've been here 6 years and love it. It's because we do genuinely care about Magic. Everybody, the guys in the warehouse are magicians, the accountants are magicians, like everybody's a magician. I was my target audience before I worked here. And so I know what I want. And so that makes it more fun and kind of easier than the job I had previously to this was an enterprise level hosting company. And I genuinely don't care about servers. But I had to pretend to make people want to buy them. So when it's something it doesn't feel like work anymore. I'm 53 next month, and this is the first job I've had where I get out of bed on a Monday morning and I'm looking forward to it. And that's find what you love, and then it doesn't feel like work.
And that's very rare. That feeling, and also I'm retired now, but I was in meetings and events business for years, dealing with a million different kinds of companies in different departments. And in most situations, marketing is way up front when it comes to new products. And it has to go through marketing before you even get to develop it. If marketing goes, I don't know how to sell that, then they get rid of it. Whereas you guys have flipped that. It's like the magic elves go, we love this product. This is really cool. It excites us. Now, Damian and your team, you have to figure out how to sell it.
Yes.
Which is a reverse of how it's normally done, because the mindset seems to be, we want to just make great magic.
Yeah. Yeah. Be that a book or a packet trick or a parlor trick or the crazy $500 Hector Mancha private lesson thing. That if your listeners don't know, Hector Mancha did a trick on Fool Us and fooled them and wanted to teach it, and we figured out a way that he's selling it with personal one-to-one Zoom lessons, and it costs $500, and you can do it with a regular deck. There's no gimmicks. You're not buying any fancy toy. There's some sleight of hand and some thinking and some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful choreography. And that's what you're paying for. And so I think we try to do different things as well and see whether they resonate. Like the retreat conventions that we do.
Yes.
That just started off because Josh and Andy quite fancy going to Costa Rica. And then we thought, how can we make this into a thing? And now it's a thing where I don't know the exact percentages off the top of my head, but around about 75% of people that are there book for the next one because they have such an incredible time. It's, 60, 70 magicians in an amazing place with Josh and Andy and 2 or 3, famouses. And it's half holiday, half magic convention. And, that it's trying new things. We were the very, very pioneering when the industry started going from DVD to downloads. And I think you always have to be trying new things and seeing what works and what doesn't. But most importantly, from a marketing point of view, trying to measure as best you can what works and what doesn't, and test different things and try new things and keep working on it.
So this is, Damian, it's a family show, but I want to see if there's anything you learned in your past marketing life in, let's just say the adult entertainment industry. Has any of that carried over into what you're doing now?
I've worked in a few different verticals, and I kind of think that marketing is the same whatever you're selling, that you find out what's the pain point that the person has, what's the problem that you're here to help them solve, what's the hole. So do you know about selling drill bits or selling holes? Have you heard this analogy before?
Tell us like we haven't.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that I have. So
so I'm selling a drill, but I don't show you a picture of a drill because that's boring. I show you a picture of painting on a wall because that's the thing that you can achieve when you've bought the product, or some shelves perfectly aligned, or the hole is what they're buying, not the drill. And so when you can figure out what the hole is, then you can sell it. And that's a horribly unfortunate turn of phrase, considering we were talking about the adult industry. However, I think probably the one thing that the adult industry gave me the chance to do was be very relaxed in my copywriting, even though like the longest bit of that was working for Playboy, which was quite corporate at the time, and they were making more money licensing the bunny logo than they were from any of the content that they produced, which was it was a while ago. It was before that sort of content was free on the internet, so that's how long ago it was that I was doing it. But when you can speak to people like you speak to somebody at a bar, that's what I like with marketing, that you get rid of this formal businessy kind of talk and you just treat your customers or prospective customers as humans. Shorter sentences, not particularly erudite words, and just talk like you would to a normal person. And then people hopefully enjoy getting your emails, enjoy reading your copy, and find that it resonates with them and speaks to them.
Jim, didn't you recently have an example of that with someone you buy hats from and their emails?
Yeah. I'm not wearing one of their hats right now, but there's a hat company called Black Clover, and they're just baseball hats, but they're so clever in the way they talk to me in their emails that I have become a huge fan of not just their hats, but their style. So I look forward to getting their emails, even if I don't intend to buy that particular hat. I always get a kick out of it, and I really like the J. Peterman catalog for that.
I was just going to say,
Yeah, I enjoy reading that catalog. I seldom order their products, but I order enough of it so that I stay on the catalog list because I enjoy reading their copy. I think it's delightful. So that idea of shorter sentences, talk like you're talking to a friend, that's a good thing for me to hear as I occasionally have to market a show.
Sure.
And sometimes don't take that advice, and I should.
Yeah, and a light touch of humor, I think, always works. So I'm not particularly jokey with everything, but there's little nods here and there. So Matt and I both write the copy for the newsletters, even though he normally is the signature on them. But his job title officially is Secret Operations Manager. And it always changes not always, frequently changes in the emails when I can think of a funny, or we can think of a funny thing to do with it. So when we did the email for this Hector Mancha World's Greatest Card Trick, his job title became Secret Greatest Operations Manager. And it's not pee your pants funny, but my aim is to give somebody a wry grin. If I just have that's what I like to do.
And I love it.
And it works. And I don't know if you didn't notice, Jim got his credit card out there, and while we were talking, I think he bought that $500.
I'm ready to go. I love that idea. That's smart. And I realize it's probably, there's a finite amount of people who are going to say, I'm going to spend $500 and Zoom with this guy, versus what I bought, which was it's self-working and you don't need a lot of, that's where I live, but smart, because there are people out there who are going to say, no, I would absolutely do that. And frankly, I might be one of those people at some point. I may go to that. And I'm intrigued by not necessarily learning the trick that you're selling for $500, but I'm intrigued enough by the idea to say, I might drop $500 just to see how this works and experience this. So it's smart.
Nobody done anything like it. That green Magic Forum found it hilarious that we were even considering it. But how do you find the best way to learn unless you try other things? And obviously, it's not for everybody. And obviously, not everybody is in a situation to have that sort of disposable income to spend on learning one trick. But for those that have, when you look at the reviews on the pages, and I just got a new review in this morning for somebody that bought it, and when you look at the reviews, everybody that's done it is very, very, very happy and pleased. And that's what you want. I don't want the box disappointment. I want people to get the thing and be happy, because when they're happy, they'll stick around.
As you go forward now, have you run into instances where marketing has put up their hand at the end of the process and gone, we don't know how to do this, we don't know, or is it just a trial and error and you're going to find a way to do it?
We'll find a way. We'll certainly try our very, very, very hardest to find a way. Sometimes when the product team and Josh and Andy are unsure about a potential release, be that a book or a trick or a download or masterclass person, we have one weekly marketing meeting with everybody involved, and they might ask our opinion then, and we don't have the power to veto something really, but we may offer an opinion or come up with a way to tweak it slightly to make it appeal to a broader range of people, be that including something that wasn't with one of the Black Friday, fingers crossed, releases is a trick that, can't tell you what it is, that when you open the box, you may have been disappointed, but the addition of one simple thing completely fixes that. So that was a situation where the product had already been greenlit and was indeed being manufactured when we were asked to come up with the script ideas for it. And then we were thinking, and it was like, if we just put that in the box as well, then it would solve this thing. And hopefully everybody will now be happy when they open the box, when they get that. So, and because Matt works a lot doing gigs and I don't so much, but because we work and we market, it's like, well, if I got that, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to fix this? And that's what puts us in a, I think, advantageous position, because we do get high on our own supply. We are magicians.
It's the ideal situation. It's ideal.
Okay.
Damian, I'm keeping an eye on the clock here because I know you have a hard out. So I'm going to just jump ahead to a couple ending things here. It's been a delight chatting with you, as I knew it would be. Wouldn't it be funny if you were just a horrible person? You're so nice on the podcast, and we get you on here, and you're just like, that would have been
cantankerous old man
with one-word answers. Yes. No,
yes. Great. Okay. Thanks.
So you were mentioning just now, you are getting higher in your own supply. You have, 1 foot in magic and 1 foot in the business side of magic.
Mm-hmm.
With that weird sort of stereoscopic view, what trends do you see moving ahead in the world of magic?
That's a really good question. I can see, because looking at our traffic on the website, I can see that mentalism is the fastest rising area that is not card tricks in terms of organic traffic. So that's traffic from Google or Bing or whatever, someone searching for how to read minds, or that's the thing I'm seeing increase dramatically quickly over the last 12 months compared to previously, that more and more people are getting interested in that. I think also that there are a bunch of workers that don't want to interrupt people for a living anymore and want to be able to do a show where people are knowing that they're coming to see a magician. They have bought the ticket expecting a magic show, rather than doing a corporate or a wedding or what have you, where they're walking around and being a professional interrupter. I think people are getting tired of that. And the other thing I think is just a huge explosion in books, that we obviously all love magic books, but the volumes of magic books that we are selling now is increasing as a learning mechanism and as a collector's thing.
Okay. Some of that uptick in sales might just be Jim. So
it could be because again, you sort of nail me when you say mentalism is on, because that is certainly something that I am now thinking about what I could do. And I think the idea that people are wanting to put together a show rather than be professional interrupters. I'm not going to say it's entirely due to Fool Us, but I think shows like Fool Us and the show, and I'm blanking on the name of the show.
Like America's Got Talent and Britain's Got Talent.
Right. Has gotten magic to a different place than
Completely.
It was in people's consciousness, even, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago. The idea of buying a ticket to a magic show now is sort of like, yeah, I would do that. Where 15 years ago, it was like, oh, I don't really like magic, because most people, most people's experience with magic was being interrupted and not really, it was like, and sometimes that magic wasn't particularly good.
Sure.
It would be a family member that was not particularly talented.
Yeah,
and
doing
so
the 21 card trick on Thanksgiving. Yeah,
that's right. And so now we're seeing this magic have this sort of renaissance where people are intrigued by it and believe it's an art form. And I'm really encouraged by that and excited by that. And
yeah, I mean, you just look at the number of shows there are in New York now, in Chicago, in London now. There's 4 or 5, and obviously Darren's touring theatrical show. But yeah, there's so. And Edinburgh now is just like a magic.
Right.
It's used to be stand-up comedy, and magic seems to be taking over. That not only are people prepared to pay, I guess it's a chicken and egg, isn't it? When you get people that are prepared to pay and you have the place where they can pay, then it's all just a beautiful, beautiful moment.
Yeah.
It all comes together. So you market magic every day. You understand the marketing of magic. Do you have any advice for the magician out there who is trying to market themselves using the same kinds of ideas you're using to get them to buy things? Any thoughts they can glom onto on how to get people to buy them?
It's a cliche, but sell the sizzle, not the steak. Like an events company or a corporate, they don't want a magician. I think predominantly most people who would be booking a performance don't think I want a magician. They think I want my guests entertained. So don't say I'm really good at card tricks. Say everybody will remember this event. They want, that's the other thing they want. They want people to have fun and they want people to remember it. So how can you demonstrate and prove that your services will enable that goal?
Smart. Yes, you're selling the whole.
Yeah.
And not the drill. And we really wish there was a better metaphor given what we've talked about earlier, but that's what we're stuck with. Okay, a couple quick things to wrap up. Sure. Favorite pizza topping?
I wondered whether you were going to do this. Pepperoni.
Oh, a man after my own heart. Favorite person or persons who make music?
Brad Meldo.
Okay. And finally, would you rather fight Massive Andy or 100 Tiny Joshuas? And before you answer that, how tiny is tiny? What do you? Is he like? Is he an ant? Is he 2 inches high?
No one's ever asked that question.
Well, that's why I've never been able to answer it.
I think, in the eye of the beholder, it's your own personal definition, and I would view it as sort of toy soldier size.
Okay. All right. And so your answer is a massive Andy?
Because I change it every time. Who was tiny? It was whoever's tiny. Which one's tiny in your question?
Joshua in this version.
I'd take the 100 Tiny Joshuas and stamp on them.
I'm not sure if it's clear to everyone that at the end of every podcast that he does for The Insider, he does ask the guests those rapid fire questions: favorite pizza topping, favorite musician, and who would you rather fight, a massive Andy or 100 Tiny Joshuas, or a massive Joshua or 100 Tiny Andys? And his answer is sort of like mine. I'd take it 100 Tiny Joshuas and just stomp on them.
I don't know. Having watched Gulliver's Travels as a child, that image of him pinned to the ground and strapped down by 100 little Lilliputians. I think you're underestimating Tiny Joshua's, and Damian might be as well.
It's the stuff of nightmares. Anyway, what a great conversation. As I said before, he doesn't put himself in the interviews, and so to find out stuff like, hey, he was a child star. He was in Bugsy Malone. Now, Jim, have you ever seen the movie Bugsy Malone?
I have not, although I suppose I should.
Well, it might end up being one of those I love that later on, although it's not a great movie. It's an odd movie. It was made by Alan Parker, who did Fame and many, many other movies back in the 80s, and it is about gangsters. But it's all with kids playing the parts, and so it's all kids pretending to be tough, dressed in pinstripe suits, shooting each other with guns that shoot foam instead of bullets, and then a handful of songs by Paul Williams.
He's a sinner, candy-coated. For all his friends, he always seems to be alone. But they love him, Bugsy Malone.
Isn't Jodie Foster in it?
Jodie Foster plays a vamp singer in it. I think same year she
Yep.
did Taxi Driver. I mean, it's a trip, and somebody somewhere said, "Well, this will work on stage," and then apparently it's very popular in like junior highs to put on Bugsy Malone because the songs are great and it's fun. So someday that might be, and I love that. If not, just go ahead and track it down yourself.
I think I will listen to the podcast before I venture into Bugsy Malone territory. But you never know. There
never
could
know.
be a time I might be just sitting quietly and think, now's the time for Bugsy Malone.
Or
Here I
you might
sit.
be listening to Damian interviewing some magician on the podcast, and all of a sudden he'll break into a song from Bugsy Malone.
And that would do it. That would give me the springboard I need to watch Bugsy Malone, the movie. But what a great interview, and what a fascinating guy with so much to talk about. We barely scratched the surface. Certainly the Tony Sagittarius thing, I would kill to see. Kill to see.
Yeah, he seems to have. There's a link in the show notes to it, in addition to what I dropped in for you to hear. He seems to have found a way to balance that in our fraught times, and to be so extreme that people get the joke. I was also a little surprised, and then not, when I realized how knowledgeable he is interviewing magicians, just how wide his span has been doing close-up, mentalism, stand-up parlor. He really does know what he's talking about, which makes him great to interview magicians, but also, I imagine, in marketing, like he said, he's marketing to himself. He's marketing to you, Jim.
Yeah, he really just straight to me, and it works perfectly. But I also I loved him saying, we're using our own supply, which made me kind of chuckle and giggle because yes, if I was in his shoes, I would be absolutely delighted to use some of the things that. Just a fascinating guy and a wonderful interview, and and I didn't even talk about the accent. What a great accent he's got.
What a great voice. Anyway,
Yeah.
there'll be a link in the show notes. If it's down to us or the Insider, I wish you'd stay with us, but if you can do two podcasts, listen to the Insider. It does not do a lot of selling. The selling it does is fairly subtle, but he's a really, really good interviewer. So check out Damian Jennings and the Insider.
Well, I will.
Okay, now it's time for my favorite segment. I love that, and I believe you're going to go first this time. Did you come up with an I love that for this episode?
I did indeed, yeah, and it's one of those movies that I periodically will watch, although I think the last time I watched it was 25 years ago.
So that's not really periodic, Jim.
Well, I used to watch it more than I do now. I saw
Okay.
it first when it was in the theater with my brother and his wife, and took a liking to it then, although I was pretty young to fully appreciate it. But I have gone back to it several times, and I like both of the actors so much that it's just sort of in my rotation. But the last time I watched it, I was in my Masonic Lodge with other Masons watching this movie, and I can't recommend it highly enough. I love The Man Who Would Be King.
There is no place on earth too forbidding. There is no adventure too dangerous to dare. There is no dream of wealth and glory too impossible for the man who would be king. Connery and Kane. Rogue and renegade. Reckless and fearless soldiers of fortune on the richest adventure of their life. Across 1,000 miles of danger, come with Sean Connery and Michael Caine as they try to capture a whole country, a scheme for rascals to become royalty in the long-lost land of Alexander the Great. Rudyard Kipling's The Man Who Would Be King.
Just a tremendous, if you think you have seen great acting, you have not seen Sean Connery like this. He's terrific, as is Michael Caine. Two excellent actors, really at the top of their game. Plus, yes, go ahead.
Christopher Plummer, come on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really terrific. And just do yourself a favor, turn off the phone, stop all of the things that can distract you, and give it your full attention. And I think it'll become one of your I love that's. The Man Who Would Be King is terrific.
Did you know the history of that film? Well, let me give you just a little. It was directed by John Huston, who was quite old when he did it. But he had originally wanted to do it with, I believe, like Humphrey Bogart and Clark Gable. That's how long he's been
Oh my goodness.
holding on to that piece. And Michael Caine's wife also appears in it as well.
Really? I did not
As-
know that.
As I think she's a princess of some kind in it. I think it's
Oh.
the only time I think she got kind of badgered by Houston to appear in it, and so she does that. But yeah, it's a great movie. I remember seeing it for the first time. It ran at the Westgate Theater when I was an usher, so I could see it quite a bit.
It's one of those films that if someone doesn't bring it to your attention, you may not ever have heard of it. You may never have seen it, but boy, it's so good and such a clinic when it comes to acting, for me anyway. Watching Sean Connery and Michael Caine, each of them individually and collectively, so good, such a good. So there's my I love that for this episode.
What a great choice. Mine, you are once again the reason for mine, and it also falls into an area that you have great interest, World War II. Years and years ago, you and I were doing a corporate event in downtown Minneapolis, and you said something to the effect of, yeah, when I'm done tonight, I got to go home and pack because I'm going to London tomorrow. And I said, oh, that sounds like fun to just get up and go to London. And you said something along the lines of, well, I'm going with a group and one of them fell out. So we have a hotel room that you'll have to share, and we have an airline ticket all ready to go. And we're seeing a particular show there. So if you want to go, just go. And I was unattached and only had a cat who needed to be taken care of. And so next day I got on a plane with you and a bunch of other people. We were going to go see them play The Woman in Black.
Yeah.
Because you were going to be producing or co-producing that play, and we were in London for several days. And on one of the open evenings, our good friend Peter Moore, who I was sharing a room with, who was going to direct A Woman in Black, and we were walking around going, what do you want to go see? And we saw a marquee for a play called Copenhagen.
Oh,
And we went up and noticed it was written by Michael Frayn, who had written Noises Off, which is one of the funniest plays ever. And so knowing nothing about it, we wandered into the theater and were pulled into the world of Copenhagen, which is a 3-person play about Niels Bohr, the physicist, and Werner Heisenberg, a physicist who was a student of his, and Niels Bohr's wife. And they are all dead, and they are talking about and reliving a moment during World War II when Heisenberg, who was in Germany, came to occupied Denmark, came to Copenhagen to talk to Niels Bohr. And he wanted to talk with him privately, and apparently the conversation, which took place outdoors, was abruptly ended by Bohr, and people had speculated for years and years and years, what did Heisenberg want to talk about? Was he asking, because they're both physicists and they both understood what was happening in fission at that point, was he going to ask, how do I make a bomb? Or was he going to ask, how do I make sure we don't make a bomb?
Now we're all dead and gone, yes. And there are only 2 things the world remembers about me. One is the uncertainty principle. The other is my mysterious visit to Niels Bohr in Copenhagen in 1941. Everyone understands uncertainty, or thinks he does. No one understands my trip to Copenhagen. Time and time again I've explained it. To Bohr himself and Margrethe. To interrogators and intelligence officers, to journalists and historians. The more I've explained, the deeper the uncertainty has become. Well, I shall be happy to make one more attempt. Now we're all dead and gone. Now no one can be hurt. Now no one can be betrayed.
And it was a fascinating play, just wonderfully done. And years later, flipping around channels somewhere, and I found a TV version.
really?
Starring Stephen Ray and Daniel Craig as Niels Bohr
Really?
and Werner Heisenberg. And they've opened it up a bit, but it is still just the 3 of them kind of wandering around open spaces and sets and things, doing the play, doing this conversation between and among these three people and revisiting that moment in the woods when they were talking. And then it disappeared. I couldn't find it. But it has turned up again recently on YouTube. I don't know how long it's going to stay on YouTube. I'll put a link in the show notes. It is the entire TV version, plus it opens and closes with sort of mini documentaries with Michael Frayn, the playwright, and I think Heisenberg's son is in it, and some other physicists, kind of helping you get up to speed before the play starts as to what was going on, and then commenting after the play is done. If that does disappear, and it's YouTube, so it sure could, there's also another excellent version that was produced by the BBC that you can get on Audible, which stars Benedict Cumberbatch and Simon Russell Beale.
Wow.
And it is designed for, I guess I say designed for headphones. It's not immersive, but they're not emoting to an audience. For example, LA Theater Works has a version that Alfred Molina does, but it's done in front of an audience. And so they are emoting to an audience, whereas the BBC version, I'll put a link to that in the show notes, with Benedict Cumberbatch and Simon Russell Beale, they are talking like this to you and to each other. Both of them excellent, both productions. Well worth a listen or a watch, just because it's, you don't need to know anything about physics to understand it. It's just about two people trying to understand what their intentions were at the time. So anyway, Copenhagen, either the TV version with Stephen Ray and Daniel Craig, or the audio version with Simon Russell Beale and Benedict Cumberbatch.
Both will be in the show notes.
They will.
But let's say we get down to business, my
You
friend.
got it.
Mike.
Where are we at?
Last time it was chapter 4, I believe I read. And
Yes.
before I launch into chapter 5, just give us the recap.
Sure. Chapter 4. Eli and Megan are not going to stay in town. They've been invited out to Baxter's house on Hampstead Heath. There's lunch with all the magicians there. We find out Jake North is performing in a play called A Pretty Taste for Paradox. And the chapter ends with the idea that if somebody had wanted to kill Harry, if that was what was supposed to happen on stage at the Magic Circle, then they might try again.
Dun, dun, dun. Here we go.
Chapter 5. The crowds of people pushing through Leicester Square were a stark contrast to the peace and quiet I'd experienced at the Baxter estate out on the Heath. Lawrence Baxter had attempted to send us to the theater district with his car and driver, but we opted to hop on the underground and experience the adventure of taking the tube. Harry led the way, his knowledge of the subway system seemingly undiminished in the several years he'd spent away from London. "Best transit system in the world," he said, as he marched confidently through the stations, down corridors and up seemingly endless escalators and stairs before we emerged into the brightly lit streets around the Leicester station. The sudden crush of people was simultaneously exhilarating and a little frightening. Confident we'd successfully made it to the right neighborhood, we searched out a restaurant for a quick dinner. Harry's knowledge of the territory was invaluable, as he steered us past a number of chain restaurants and tourist traps until we found ourselves on a narrow street sprinkled with tiny ethnic restaurants. We left the selection to Harry, who picked a small Greek bistro, and soon we were noshing away on hummus and stuffed grape leaves. It was only a matter of minutes before we found ourselves equally stuffed. Despite the possible murder conviction which hovered over his head, Harry focused the conversation on local sites of interest, and Megan cross-checked our planned itinerary against Harry's past experiences. He pooh-poohed her interest in the National Portrait Gallery. "Eminently boring," he proclaimed, and instead insisted she add Highgate Cemetery to our list of must-sees. He also suggested 2 short day trips we hadn't thought of, and then agreed with my veto of the London Eye. "If it's a view you want, grab lunch in the restaurant on the top floor of the Tate Gallery," he suggested. "That's a view worth paying for." Before we knew it, dinner was over. It was time to go to the theater, and I realized that not a moment had been spent talking about Harry's current legal issues. As it turned out, I think this was his favorite part of the evening. what came next certainly wasn't. We had no trouble finding our playhouse among the several dotting the area, as Jake's name shimmered in enormous letters on the marquee. In fact, the play's title, A Pretty Taste for Paradox, appeared to be an afterthought, taking second billing to the American television star's name. Given the size of the crowd milling around in front of the theater, I was concerned we wouldn't be able to snag the necessary third ticket for Harry. Once we had made our way to the front of the box office line, a clerk behind the thick glass typed and packed at a keyboard, searching for an elusive single seat. There was nothing available in our row, but she did eventually find a seat in the Queen's box, just to the left of the stage. Harry would be joining a party of 3, while we would be situated in less posh seats in the stalls. Once we learned there was no intermission, we settled on a place to meet after the show and then took our seats. I looked up at the box and saw Harry as he entered and took his seat just as the house lights dimmed. And then A Pretty Taste for Paradox began. The mild applause that occurred when the curtain came up was nothing compared to the thunderous ovation Jake received when he made his first entrance. The action of the play came to a halt while the audience went nuts. Jake, for his part, just stood there, smirking. That same smirk I remembered from high school plays, in which he would ad-lib, break up the rest of the cast, and then just stand there like the outburst was entirely outside of his control. Jake's movie star good looks and natural charm and ease on stage were as evident now as they had been back in high school. I recognized that immediately. He was simply performing to a larger audience, and one with the type of disposable income that doesn't think twice about high-priced theater tickets. He was playing The American in an extremely broad takeoff of Agatha Christie-style mysteries. The story, what there was of it, concerned a series of mysterious deaths at an old English manor home and the many curious and stereotypical characters staying there. I wasn't familiar with the play, but I got the sense it must have been slightly retooled to include in-jokes about Jake and his popular, albeit trashy, TV series. As the main character on Blind Man's Bluff, Jake played a Lothario who pretends to be blind in order to impress and subsequently seduce women. It was a far cry from masterpiece theater and was insanely popular with American audiences, but reviled by critics. As an apparent nod to that show, Jake blurted out his show's most famous catchphrase, "What are you, blind?" at odd moments in the story. This was much to the delight of the audience, although it didn't add much to the plot or the pacing of the show. I wasn't sure if it was the play or my current situation, but my mind kept turning back to the charges that hung over Harry's head. Certainly, the police must understand, I thought, that it had been the simple toss of a coin that had placed Oscar and not Harry in the fatal seat. If the toss had gone differently, I would likely be sitting at a wake this evening instead of a slightly uncomfortable theater seat. There was also the question of motive, of which there was precious little on Harry's part. I didn't know much about Oscar's relationship with the other Magi, but I couldn't imagine that anyone, including the London police, would take the position that a pilfered card move from 30 years before was considered a strong enough motive for a minor assault, let alone a cold-blooded murder. As the show dragged on, I kept drifting back to these thoughts, thinking I must be the only one in the theater not enjoying the play. However, a quick glance at Megan and the expression on her face told me I wasn't alone. I looked up at Harry and could see his attention had wandered from the stage. He was looking around the old theater, which clearly offered more of interest than the play. The conclusion of the show, when it blessedly arrived, was delayed, if only briefly, by a quick polling of the audience. At the moment of climax, the action on stage froze, and one of the actors stepped out of the story and up to the footlights. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," he said, in what was probably a fair Cockney accent, but what do I know? I was raised on Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. "It's time to reveal the identity of the killer. But this is not for us to decide. You have seen all the evidence. You have listened to each of the suspects being interrogated. And now, you are going to decide who is tonight's killer." The hubbub this created suggested the majority of the audience was aware of this feature of the show, while the minority, such as Megan and myself, needed to get ourselves up to speed on this new twist. The voting process involved the small remote control style device which was attached to the armrest of each seat. I hadn't noticed it before, but I pulled it from its slot and examined the face of the device. There were 5 buttons labeled 1 through 5, and then a green button at the bottom labeled Enter. The actor at the footlights then introduced the 5 suspects, who each stepped forward in a fun or menacing manner as they held up a large cardboard number. Then, voting commenced. The theater became more energized than at any point in the evening as the actor counted down from 10, and the patrons conferred with their seatmates before pressing one of the numbers and casting their votes. I was torn on who to vote for, so I sneaked a peek at Megan's choice, the charming, malapropping old British colonel who had some of the best lines in the show, and simply followed her lead, then looked up to see the results. A video tally screen consisting of 5 columns had been lowered, and the screen was awash with a flurry of numbers as the end of the countdown approached and voting finished. "And our murderer is number 3, the American. There's a surprise," the actor said dryly from the footlights. There was wild applause and cheering, and then as Jake stepped forward, we also heard some good-natured booing. Key moments of the play were then recreated, with Jake narrating the action, showing how he got away with each of the murders. Given that the story was structured so any one of the 5 characters could conceivably be the murderer, the solutions he presented strained credibility, to say the least. But the audience didn't seem to care, and at the end, they gave the cast a rousing round of applause. Jake was even called back out to take a final bow of his own. As the curtain descended and the applause died down, I turned to Megan. "Are we going to the stage door to say hello?" she asked. Her tone suggested no would be her preferred answer. "I thought we might," I said. "What can we possibly say?" Megan said. "I mean, without telling the truth." I shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe Harry will have an idea." I looked up at the Queen's box. Harry was waiting patiently for the others to exit before he could leave. I caught his eye. He shook his head and gave me not 1, but 2 thumbs down. I got the distinct impression, for this moment at least, he would have preferred to possess at least a couple more thumbs. "Looks like we could have dodged a bullet on this one," Harry said quietly, "had we only taken a slightly closer look at the critical blurbs heralded on these posters." We were standing at the fringe of a large crowd of people who had gathered around the theater's stage door, ostensibly to catch a glimpse of the departing cast. However, given the chatter going on around us, it was clear the primary target of this potential love fest was none other than my old high school chum, Jake North. I looked over at the posters on the theater's outer walls, bright, colorful sales tools with more than their share of exclamation points. Large, capitalized words like hysterical, stunning, and a bright light touted a pretty taste for paradox as the one show to see this season in London's West End. "Turns out," Harry continued as he stepped up to the poster for a closer inspection, "hysterical refers to the costumes, which were, at best, amusing. Stunning is in reference to the set, which, ironically, was the least wooden thing on the stage. and without the benefit of my glasses, I can't quite read what a bright light refers to. However, if my personal experience is any indication, it may have been the errant lighting instrument which was shining in my eyes for the majority of the ordeal." My intended witty riposte was cut short by a sudden cheer from the crowd as the stage door swung open and Jake North stepped out of the theater. He feigned a look of surprise at the gathered crowd, putting a hand first to his mouth and then to his heart to demonstrate his intense humility toward their completely understandable affection for him. In what sounded like a practiced speech, an unctuous underling who clung to his side announced, "Mr. North would love to sign autographs, but he must rush off to a previously scheduled television appearance. Watch for him later tonight on BBC 4. The underling repeated this announcement as he, with the help of 3 beefed-up bodyguards, forged a path for Jake through the crowd, snaking him toward a waiting car at the curb. Fans pushed and waved programs and called his name lovingly, but all they got in return was a smirk and a wave from Jake, who seemed to be relishing his role as the lead salmon heading upstream through a river of fans. It was looking like we were going to be spared the embarrassment of telling him what we thought of the show when he happened to turn my way just before getting into the stretch limo. Our eyes locked for a second, and I could see the wheels spinning as he tried to place me in this out-of-context environment. And then all the cherries lined up and it clicked for him. "Eli," he said, stammering a bit, "you're here in London." "Just for a few days," I yelled back. "Cool," he said, looking around for a moment like he had forgotten why he was standing there. The underling pointed toward the open car door. Jake turned back to me. "We should talk or something. Great to see you," he added, then slipped into the car. It was already moving before he had shut the door. "Well, thank goodness," Megan sighed as the crowd began to disperse. I couldn't think of one positive thing to say to him about the show. My go-to has always been, "Boy, it sure looked like you were having fun up there," I suggested. I turned to Harry, but he was staring after the car, scratching his beard thoughtfully. "It's probably apocryphal," he said, "but they say Noah Webster was once discovered by his wife while in the midst of canoodling with the chambermaid. 'Noah, I am surprised by you,' she bellowed at him. And he looked over and said, 'No, my dear, I am surprised. You are shocked.'" Harry continued to watch the car until it turned a corner and disappeared from sight. I knew enough not to ask, that the explanation would come at Harry's pace, not mine. A few moments after the car was gone, he turned back to the two of us. "Your friend Jake," he finally said, "he was either surprised or shocked to see you. The trouble is, I can't quite figure which it was."
Yes, surprised or shocked. Isn't that the famous Noah Webster thing where Mrs. Webster comes in and finds him with a young woman and says, what is it now? I'm surprised. And he says, "No, I'm surprised. You're shocked." Anyway, have you ever seen one of those mystery
Yeah.
shows
I
where
auditioned for one.
yeah, which one was it?
Sheer Madness.
You auditioned for that.
I-
Well,
I
I'll just
auditioned.
say it shows that the audience picks the killer. And you auditioned. I saw Sheer Madness over in St. Paul 30 years ago.
Yeah. That's when I auditioned. Did not get it, obviously. It was for, I think, a touring production, and it's a good thing I didn't get it because I was newly married, and it's just the wrong time to take a tour.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll say right out of the gate that I wouldn't mind the work, but I'm not a particularly big fan of a show that is so open-ended that the audience can decide who the killer is. If you're going to go to a murder mystery, I'd like there to, as a show or an event, I'd like there to be a clear-cut, this is the right answer, not it's so broad that any one of these people could
Yeah.
be the.
It's not much fun.
Yeah, that,
I had that same problem with Sheer Madness. I actually have that problem with the movie Clue, where it doesn't really make any sense at all if they're all available to do it. So anyway, that's the kind of show that he is in at that point.
there's an Agatha Christie thing that, on the other hand, that I don't mind that everybody could be involved because it makes sense. But
Yes.
yeah, but
We don't want to tip that, but yes.
I won't. But it won't give you the in case you haven't. But it's out there, and there's a new version of it as well. So, but yeah, that's what Jake is doing in this.
Yes, he's doing that kind of a show, and
Yeah.
apparently Harry doesn't realize that the quotes on the poster out front are, big words of praise, and then you see the small letters, and it's for the costumes of the set, which is what actually happened to Amy and I in London when we saw a show with actors that we really like, and we left at intermission because it was just terrible, and we're like, why are these posters saying they're so great? And then you look, and it's like outstanding costumes.
That's
hysterical
marketing.
Sets.
You
Yeah,
know
it is
who'd-
marketing.
You know who'd love that? Our
Damian
guest,
Jennings.
Damian. Yeah, he
Yeah.
would be impressed with
Yeah, and so the question that's left at the end of that chapter is, why was Jake a little surprised and maybe even a little upset to see Eli? What's going on there? I guess we'll find out
It's a good
that
question.
next time when we listen to chapter 6. We're also going to next time revisit some important thoughts from Stan Allen, the editor of the former Magic magazine, which doesn't exist any longer, but also the current mastermind behind Magic Live, as he has been forever, in which Stan talks to us about magic exposure and why it bothers him. And I'll just give you the short version because he doesn't like the way it disrespects magic.
The art.
The art of magic.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you're right. Yeah. So, and that's one of the reasons I don't like it. I like magic as an art, and I think we are seeing it have an incredible renaissance right now due to many factors, not the least of which is, and I keep beating the drum for Penn and Teller's Fool Us, their exposure of good magic has elevated the idea of going to see a magician, I think, in the popular zeitgeist, if you will.
As opposed to unnamed magicians online who are just exposing magic in order to rack up numbers.
Right.
Anyway, we
I
will
don't like
go
it.
into depth a little bit more about that with the great Stan Allen next time, along with chapter 6 of The Linking Rings. Until then, take care, everybody. We'll talk soon.
I can hardly wait.
This has been Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and Jim Cunningham. Produced by Alberts Bridge Books at Grass Lake Studios. Find this podcast and all the books in the Eli Marks series at EliMarksMysteries.com. That's ELIMARKS Mysteries.com. And thanks for listening.